So Obsession is this new horror movie that came out not too long ago, and after just watching it, I have a lot of thoughts. Bear, our main character, is a sad, down on his luck guy who has a crush on the charming Nikki. But he doesn't know how she feels about him, and because of that, he's unsure of how to confess his feelings. Unfortunately, things take a terrible turn when he makes a wrong wish that turns his life and the life of everyone around him upside down. Okay, so forget everything I've just said. In fact, none of that is true. After watching the movie for myself, I can tell you for a fact that everything I've said about the main character, Bear, is not at all who he is, and Obsession as a story is completely different from how I just described it. In this video, I want to dissect everything that happened in the movie, the events, and just how much of a horrible person Bear actually is. I hope all of us who watch the movie can all agree on how terrible this guy is and how he's not the prey in this movie as much as he is the predator. And if you don't think so, I can only hope that at the end of this video, you are able to change your mind. Naturally, there will be spoilers ahead. So yeah, let's get into the video, shall we? So, who is Bear? Let's start with that. Just going by the name alone, we can see it's the name of a predator. That's obviously not enough to tell you like his role in the story, but I believe his name is symbolic. Although modern media has painted bears to be, these cuddly little creatures with even stuffed animals being labeled after them, bears are the true predators of the jungle, and I believe this amply describes our protagonist in Obsession. When we are first introduced to him, Bear seems like this, relatable, shy, uncertain guy who is just trying to confess his feelings to his crush. We can clearly see that he has strong feelings for Nikki. And he just wants to let it out. But what is actually going on here? To be honest, the movie makes it very clear to us that Nikki does not see him that way, and she has clearly friend-zoned him. In fact, Bear is more like a brother to her, nothing more. But Bear doesn't know this, right? Right? I actually believed this at first, and maybe for the first half of the movie, that assumption held true. But the deeper you go into this movie, the more you realize that something more sinister is actually going on. The more the story progresses, it becomes increasingly clear that Nikki just never saw Bear that way. And I believe that Bear, to an extent, already knew. I think Bear was aware, deep down, that Nikki didn't see him the way he saw her. And that's what led him to make the wish that turned everything upside down. He wanted her to love him enough to make a wish for it. This just shows fundamentally who Bear is as a character. He's an extremely selfish person who cannot just live with the idea that, his crush does not love him or does not feel the same way about him. Like, bro, big deal. But he just can't admit that. In fact, in this movie, I've come to believe that Bear was actually the one who was obsessed with Nikki. This unhealthy fixation he has on this girl and his extreme desire to make sure that she feels the exact same way about him proves this. He so badly wants their relationship to work, even though he clearly can see that it's wrong and it's weird and it is strange. Everyone around him even tells him the same, but he's not willing to admit it. He doesn't stop. He can't stop. He refuses to stop. Why? Because even though he is tormented by this new Nikki, he still prefers this new reality of his to the past one. The one where Nikki doesn't feel the way he feels about her. And that is what makes me believe that Bear knew from the beginning that Nikki just didn't, fuck with him that way. So, how bad is Bear exactly? Now, I don't think anyone would argue with me when I say Bear isn't a good person, but I can see some people trying to empathize with him, like, throughout the story. If you are one of those people, I'll have to tell you to just stop, okay? Just stop. People like Bear are who I consider to be the true scum of the earth. We can see many signs of this throughout the story that Bear does not care about anyone but himself. To start with, even though he knows Nikki is acting weird, most likely drunk on something, he still doesn't exercise the right amount of restraint and he proceeds to kiss her. Like, bro, she seems clearly drunk and she just told you her dad is sick, she's depressed. But the least you could expect from someone who is like so close to her, who is such a close friend, is to show some restraint. But no, He clearly goes for it until she is the one who backs off and is clearly freaked out and turned off by the situation. Now, this might not seem all too egregious on Bear's part, especially when you're watching it for the first time. After all, this is all he has ever wanted. This is his crush. And Nikki was the one who initiated it at first. You can make excuses for him at this point. But as time passes, we get to see more and more examples of this predatory nature of his surfacing. To me, Bear is a classic example of the nice guys or the good people, the good men who don't get the girls. They're usually the understanding guy friends, the besties who fulfill that role of support and comfort, but they are willing to take advantage the moment they get the chance. Now, I'm not saying all guy best friends are like this, but Bear absolutely is. After their first night together, we get to see Bear actually talking to Ian and telling him just how crazy, the first night was and how weird Nikki was acting. Yet, we see that there is a kind of joy that is in Bear's demeanor when he tells Ian, his best friend, like, you won't believe what happened last night. Like, even though the event was deeply disturbing, why would he express it in such a way? What's even more interesting is that, when Nikki comes to visit him the next night, and, we can see that he clearly has this guilty expression as if he took advantage of her. And he frantically tells her that, I didn't take advantage, you're trying to make it seem like I did. And, she tells him he wasn't taking advantage, and he feels relieved at this point. I believe he was just projected. I believe that he knew what he did. He knew that he crossed the line. But when Nikki, didn't push on it and actually accepted his explanation, he was relieved and, he was happy. So at this point, I don't believe he was fully aware of the power of the one wish will, but I believe he deeply suspected it. Still, he didn't want it to end. It's only after things start to take a terrible turn for him that Bear decides to alter his wish. Not to end it, even though that was the first option that was presented to him from the other side when he called, but to tweak it. It's only after he now realizes that, I can't change my wish. And also after he confirms that, Nikki's love for him was real, that he decides to take the chance to, just end the wish. Of course, we all know that, the wish couldn't be ended. But we can see that Bear was willing to make a safe choice. He didn't want something that cost him. He didn't want the love to end, because if Nikki's love for him is real in the first place, even if he ends the wish, the love is still there and he can just confess to her and, they live happily ever after. But the moment he realized that, he couldn't have that, he just poof. I believe this just shows just how selfish this guy actually is. Then, when he realizes that the only way he can actually end the wish is by dying, you see that he is not willing to go that far for her. This shows that he doesn't love her, as much as, he tries to pretend he does. At the very least, he does not love her more than anything else in the world. Because if he did, he would clearly be willing to make that sacrifice. Just how self-serving can a guy actually be? Later, when it becomes so obvious to him that this love isn't real, he still seems unwilling to stop it, to make it end. Even though he knows he is denying Nikki of her autonomy, even though he knows she doesn't actually feel this way about him, he just doesn't want it to stop. You may think that, he's trapped in a relationship, he's trapped in this relationship, Nikki is clearly obsessed with him and dangerous. But I don't think so. Bear was clearly not clueless about this entire endeavor, because he looked it up online. He looked up, is this one wish willow real? He called the other side to confirm details. He was very proactive in this story to show you that, he was willing to find answers, but when the answers he found didn't suit him, he just gave up. And throughout the story, we see that Nikki didn't even hurt Bear once. The furthest she was willing to go was hurting others or hurting herself, but she never hurt Bear himself. His life was never really in danger. Yet, he was, as long as he was safe, as long as he got what he wanted, he was not willing to cross that line and just stop things as they were. Think about this. When he called the other side and the man asked him, do you want to speak to Nikki? He cut the call. I believe he knew what the real Nikki would say. He wasn't willing to confront her on this matter. And this just goes to show how messed up Bear actually is. He never wanted to confront the real Nikki. Even when the real Nikki reached out to him, when the obsessed version was asleep, she told him to kill her. And then we can see how he just switches up, how he asks, and how he feels so hurt and wronged. And was like, is it so wrong to love? What's so wrong with being with me? Like, as if he is the victim, as if he was sort of slighted in this whole thing. And it just goes to show Bear's mentality, his victim mindset, as though, you know, he deserves this. And it's so absurd, it's so wrong, it's so strange that Nikki would rather die than actually love him and be with him. It's so, and this is his character. I believe this is actually who he really is. And that's why I say, Bear strikes me as one of those nice guys. These guys who believe they're the victims, they're the heroes of their own story. Bear initially comes off as cowardly and hesitant, and it's sort of meant to play out as a charm. But I believe these sorts of people are the most dangerous because they do not possess the virtue to actually do what's right, even if it costs them, and they are not willing to let go of something if it serves them. Even when Ian tells him that he's taking advantage of Nikki, even when Sarah tells him that this situation isn't right and Nikki never felt this way about him, Bear is unwilling to let it go. It's rather unfortunate, really. Sarah thought Nikki was the one taking advantage of him, but it was the other way around. And Ian was able to see through this. But I believe Sarah wasn't able to because of how she felt about Bear, which is something we need to talk about. What makes Bear absolutely evil? Let's talk about Sarah and Bear. I believe their dynamic perfectly exemplifies what exactly is wrong with Bear and what makes this protagonist of ours truly irredeemable in my own opinion. Our feelings for Bear holds a mirror to his character, and we can clearly see how it's very similar to how he views Nikki. Sarah loves Bear. She has feelings for him. And it's so obvious. Even Nikki tells Bear from the beginning. And so we can't say Bear is unaware of her feelings for him, right? But Bear refuses to acknowledge her feelings. He doesn't feel the same way. But this is precisely what's going on between him and Nikki. Nikki also doesn't feel the same way about him, yet he is unwilling to accept that. He doesn't even see anything wrong with him rejecting Sarah because he never saw her in that light. Even when they were in the car and she tells him, well, I was on your left. And it clearly shows he's taken aback and surprised by what she says until she clarifies. This shows that in his head, it just never registered to him that he and Sarah had that dynamic. But when you look at Bear's relationship with Sarah, we see just how close the two of them were. Sarah was a pillar in his life. She was very close to him. She was the first person he told about his cat dying. She was a shoulder for him to lean on, and he was a shoulder for her to lean on. Their relationship is like his relationship with Nikki. Bear to Sarah is how Nikki is to Bear. Yet, Bear does not feel the same way about Sarah, which is okay because Nikki also doesn't feel the same way about Bear. And while Bear in his own mind is able to dismiss Sarah's feelings and is not in that position to accept them, for some reason he cannot wrap his head around it that, Nikki also doesn't see me this way, therefore, it's alright too. The major difference between the two dynamics is that Nikki was willing to confront Bear on whether or not, he liked her. She was willing to confront him on his feelings. Bear was never going to talk to Sarah about her feelings for him or her purported feelings for him. And the interesting part is Sarah was actually willing to tell Bear how she felt, but Bear was never going to tell Nikki how he felt about her. It shows his hypocrisy. He finds it absurd that Nikki doesn't like him. He wonders what's so wrong about that. He just can't wrap his head around it. Such lack of self-awareness shows the kind of character we are dealing with here. But that isn't even the worst part. The worst part is it's only when things escalate, right? When Sarah dies and when his life is in utter shambles, his life is getting ruined, that he decides to do the right thing. He's filled with guilt, he's filled with dread, he's filled with shame. And because of all of these overwhelming feelings and all the things he has lost, he now finally decides to revert the wish. But he doesn't even consider killing himself. Even though we are told from the start, this is the only way you can stop this wish. No, what does he do? He decides to make a second wish. This guy will do just about anything to escape accountability. He decides to make a second wish. He finds out it's not possible. He runs to Ian to make the wish for him. Ian does what any of us would do. He wishes for $1 billion and, he gets the $1 billion. So real for that. And then he runs to the only person who will do what he says, the only one who is obsessed with him, the fake Nikki, and he tries to get her to make the wish for him. Even though he still knows that killing himself is always on the table, he wants her to make the wish for him. But things don't go exactly as planned, and things just escalate and devolve into a whole mess. And so he realizes, there's no other option, there's no other choice. He has to kill himself. This leads us to the final nail on the coffin. You see, Bear was never satisfied. I don't think he was ever really going to be satisfied with Nikki. Even if Nikki actually loved him or liked him, I don't think it would have, filled that void in his heart. Because, and this is shown when, the obsessed Nikki keeps asking him, why don't you love me? Why don't you love me? And I believe our question is valid because I don't think Bear loved her. Because to Bear, it was never going to be enough. You see, Nikki could never be her true self and love Bear, right? And so when he made the wish, Nikki changed and he knew she had changed. And so when she loved him, he noticed she wasn't exactly the same. And we can see him trying to tweak her personality, try to make her less weird, trying to make her fit into this mold that he wants for her. He perceives Nikki in a certain way and he wants this new Nikki to fit into that mold. But she clearly can't, because to be the real Nikki is to not love Bear. But Bear wants Nikki to love him. And now Nikki is a different person. So he will never be satisfied. Despite how harmless Bear looks, like, he's clearly very manipulative. He wants Nikki to behave in a certain way. Throughout the story, we see him try to tell her what to do, what not to do. Don't be weird. Don't look at me when I'm sleeping. Don't cut my hair. Don't do this. Don't do that. We can, in a normal relationship, these are boundaries. These are things that, but we can see that Bear is trying to shape this Nikki into being a version he wants, even though that isn't the root of the issue. Ian tells Bear she needs therapy, or they need space, they need time apart, they need this, they need that. Or what Nikki really needs is for the wish to be gone. Bear knows all of this. He's told several times. He realizes it himself. But he chooses to compromise. Instead, he always goes back to telling Nikki to behave a certain way. Because to him, that is all that matters. This is also why he chooses time and time again to try to tweak his wish or alter his wish or make a second wish or make someone else make the wish, rather than do the only thing that has been shown to work, to make the ultimate sacrifice. And when push comes to shove, when he has no other alternative, when he has to do, the right thing to kill himself, he carries a gun, tries to pull the trigger, he doesn't have the courage, fair enough. I don't think I would have the courage to shoot myself in the head, And, he decides to take pills to overdose and kill himself. But guess what happens? He tries to vomit the pills out. He just doesn't have the courage to end his life for someone else. What does this tell you about this person? He does not really care about Nikki. He doesn't care about her more than he cares about himself. He would rather live than end what he started. He refuses to take personal responsibility for his actions. But right as he's about to, puke everything out, he stopped. And then he opens the door for obsessed Nikki. He goes out, he hugs her, kisses her, and they have this little lovey-dovey romance, and then he dies. And what's interesting is that it's only after the wish has been made by Nikki, Nikki wished for him to, love her, and all of that. And so that's why he opens the door for her. It's only after the wish has been made that he stops his action. Makes me think that, it's the wish that made him, give up on saving himself. And because he loved Nikki at that point, truly loved Nikki at that point, he allowed himself to die for her and allowed her to, regain her senses. It shows that in the beginning, he just never loved her that way. He was never willing to, let her go, willing to make that choice. So yes, Bear was selfish from the very beginning. This was why he was so unwilling to admit that Nikki was acting deranged. He was willing to overlook so many signs, so many red flags, because To him, this was his fantasy, this was his dream, is all he has ever wanted. Bia didn't even care if he got the real Nikki, as long as he had someone who was loving him. And he only started seeking remedies after her actions started affecting his own life. In the end, he wasn't willing to sacrifice himself. He was perfectly willing and able to continue living his life and having Nikki's life be totally ruined by his wish. He was completely fine with that. He just couldn't kill himself. And it's only after Nikki made her wish that things eventually came to an end. Think about it. He didn't even take care of the injury on her face. He didn't clean her up when she got so messy and messed up and filthy in his house. What exactly did Bear actually do for Nikki? The gift he got for her, the one which he used it for himself. You can't make this shit up. Like, he actually didn't even give her a present. He used it for himself. So yeah, Bear never cared about Nikki. He only wanted Nikki to care about him. And isn't that what a predator is? A self-serving person who is willing to satisfy their own greed at the cost of others, usually the prey. Even when Nikki, at the start of the story, told him she was writing a love story and he confused it for romance, it shows his lack of understanding of what love is. Nikki told him that they aren't the same and he appeared taken aback by her statement. Because to him, this is what love is, this romance, and this is what his relationship with Nikki was all about. But Nikki never saw her love for him, her relationship with him that way. And he was unwilling, so unwilling to accept that fact. And that is what has led me to believe that Bear never loved Nikki. He was just obsessed with her. And in the end, that ruined her life and the life of everyone else. So yeah, that's the video. So what do you think about obsession? Is there anything I missed about Bear's analysis? You can tell me in the comments below. I know because I forgot about some things or I just didn't pick up on some of the cues, I left out a lot in the video, and I would really like for you to mention some of that in the comments down below. I usually don't make videos like this. My main focus is usually anime, manga, novels. In fact, I'm in the middle of a series comparing two of the greatest web novels of all time, but I just watched this movie like last night, and I've just been thinking about it, and so I just decided to make this video. It was supposed to be short, brief, but time just flies. So if you want to see more videos like this, video analysis, character breakdowns of movie series, just let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, to see more of this channel, and tell me what you thought about the video and what your thoughts are on obsession of Bear, of Nikki, and the characters in the show. So yeah. That's all for today. I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers.